Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world and experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy. Here is where you free your soma. Welcome, everybody, to Free Your Soma podcast, stories of somatic awakening and how to live from the inside out. Today, we're going to be talking about manifestation and about our inner and outer worlds and how they create our realities. I have a very special guest with me today. Jane Allen Chaisson is here to talk to us from Prince Edward Island. She is a manifestation and healing guide amongst other professions and iterations of this kind of work that she's been transmitting into the world. And she's been building a really beautiful community, helping people to heal and create the lives that they really want to be living, that they really are here to live. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. Can you tell our listeners just a little bit about your journey to this position, to becoming a manifestation and healing guide, like how long it's been going on, and a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I grew up a pretty traumatic childhood. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had a lot of deep-rooted anger and I was her trigger. I'm a manifestor in human design. So if anyone's aware of that dynamic, I was just constantly triggering my mother. So I was the brunt of her frustration. And I, as a highly sensitive person, I took all of that on. I took all of my father's sadness on. I always had such a deep connection with him. I always had so much compassion for him. I always knew in my heart, it's hard to put into words, but just what a special human he was. I was never angry at him for his addiction. Even as a child, I knew that he had pain. It was pain that was causing him to turn to alcohol. And so I took on all his pain. And, through adolescence, I just wanted to be a normal kid, right? I wanted to have fun. So I drank a lot and turned to alcohol myself, and which really, really devastated my mother and made her even more angry at me. And fast forward to my early 20s, I went to university. I didn't have a choice. It was my mother, you can decide what you want to do after you go to university. So I went to university and went through a very hard time with my father at that time. He was in Michigan and I was in Prince Edward Island, and he was calling me from different hospitals. It was just a very, very, very dark time. He would disappear for months at a time. And anyway, he finally passed away. And when he passed away, I couldn't even access tears. And I think that was a moment where I started to realize how disconnected I was from my body and my emotions, because I remember it so vividly. We were actually away on a trip at the time, and I remember sitting out under the moon. I'd just gotten the news and just sitting there looking under the moon, looking under the stars and the moon shining down on me, and wanting to feel something, and just I couldn't feel anything. I'm like, okay, this is weird. This is scary. So I really feel like that moment, and actually my stories never come through this way, but I'm just realizing now how deeply that moment was like an awakening for me, to kind of slap me back into, you have to get into your body. Prior to that, I think I'd already done a Reiki training, and I've been doing a lot of work in the ethers, a lot of energy work. And because I had a chronic pain in my jaw that I was always trying to heal for years. And I didn't realize that I you have to get into your body to heal what's there. And everything I was doing, like I'm talking years of work, years of energy work. Like every morning I was diligent. I'd get up, I had like a 2 hour practice, you know, yoga, meditation, energy work on myself. And I wasn't in my body for any of it. So it was like years of work where I'm just like working up here, you know, working out here and trying to make something go away rather than feel it and heal it, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, so, anyway, so as a, so I became a yoga teacher, and this just totally fell on my path because in my early 20s, you know, before my father died, I still realized, no, I didn't know I was unhappy, but I knew that my jaw really, really hurt. I knew that my jaw like really, really hurt. And so I did a yoga teacher training, and that was the moment at my yoga teacher training. Something one of the teachers said like made me realize, oh, I don't have to be in pain forever. I can heal my jaw. I'm going to heal my jaw. So I made it my intention, like I'm going to heal my jaw within a year. It didn't happen within a year. But what happened was, you know, all of these things falling into my path that I needed to do to unravel the pain in my jaw, to drop into my body, to start feeling the emotions that I needed to feel in order to truly heal. And so that's a very long way to go about it, but I've been on the path of healing, and I see it as like bringing more light into your body, like bringing more of your soul into your body. To me, that's healing. You know, the soul can't inhabit a body that is full of emotion and baggage and trauma. We have to heal and resolve all that before we can bring our soul into our bodies to be more embodied versions of our soul. So it's been about 11 years since I first made some conscious decisions to, you know, to do this work. And my first yoga teacher training was 10 years ago now, hard to believe. And then it's just been, you know, as soon as you open yourself up to allow the higher, like a higher power to guide you, and like admit that you don't have the answers, and step into a soul-led life, or like a heart path, or whatever you want to call it, instantly you begin getting guidance. You begin receiving guidance, and it's up to you to like take those steps. So I've been receiving the guidance, taking the steps, however scary, for 11 years. And my most recent endeavor is 1 year ago now. I launched a manifestation community called the Dreamweavers Collective. And that's my most recent and exciting, exhilarating soul project that my soul has guided me to create.
Wow, beautiful. Man,
That's long,
I love that story.
long description.
Such an amazing story, and talking about the relationship that you had with your parents, you know, because those core relationships really do create the beliefs and the patterns, you know, that we're carrying, not only genetically, but in terms of our conditioning, emotional and, you know, physiological conditioning. And so those core relationships, just getting a little snapshot of like where you've come from, and the you know, the wisdom and the patterns that you have been bringing in and transforming, transmuting, right, is really amazing. It was made me think immediately about, you know, and I'm not even sure where you could find this article now, but it was years ago. I read this really interesting article from an energy healer who said that he could see like you know, different kinds of like entities or other energies. And he said that he would see them a lot on alcoholics, because what his belief was is that alcohol kind of created these like fractures or holes in our energetic body, and that then our energy would leak out, and that these other like entities would come and like stick around. And he said they weren't even like evil or bad, or, they were addictive energies. They were like the souls of other alcoholics who missed being in a body and missed like alcohol. And so they would come to bars and they would come to these places where people were drinking, and there were these fractures in their, energetic body, and they would just hang out there, and they would kind of leech off the the alcohol and the pain, because that was like the resonance that they were attracted to,
Yeah.
these entities. So he could like see them. And in this article he describes, and this really spooked me because, I've had my own journey with substance abuse that was, about ultimately about trauma, that I was not reconciling on a somatic level. So I was using, marijuana or alcohol to mask that or to try to handle that, right? But he was talking about how oftentimes when we get very, very drunk, like blackout drunk, and then we sober up the next day, we will remember it from a third party perspective. Like
Hmm.
we will sometimes not remember it from a first person perspective. We will remember it as if we are like hanging above ourselves, watching ourselves do these things. And he said that's
Hmm.
because the higher self leaves the body when it becomes that toxic. When the body
Right.
becomes this toxic environment, our soul or our higher self, or whatever language you want to use, steps out, actually goes outside and observes, because it cannot be living or cannot be inside that toxic environment when you've had that much alcohol. And I found that like really, it was just like blew my mind, because I was like, yeah, like I have memories of like that, where I think back on the night before, when I was like a teen or in my 20s or something and partying, and it was like I was looking at like, who was that? Like what, who was that person? Like I don't even, that's not me. Like how was I doing that or behaving that way, and I would feel like embarrassed the next day. And so that article was really really profound for me, because he was talking about the word alcohol is comes from like a Middle Eastern word, and it means spirits.
Yes.
We refer to it as spirits, right?
Yeah.
And what it can do is it can actually draw these spirits to you, these different energies, for positive or negative, experiences.
Right. And it extracts your own spirit. And that's why we actually even use alcohol like to create tinctures, because you're extracting like the good properties that you want. The alcohol extracts it from the physical plant matter, right? Like it's an extraction tool.
Right. Yes, that makes sense to me. That's so, I love
Yes.
that when it's like it's spiritual and it's energetic, but oh no, it's actually very literal and physical too.
Do, yeah.
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 Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read that article and I can feel it. Like if I barely ever am out at night anymore, but if I happen to be and like, I'm walking past a bar or something, I get that creepy feeling that I feel when I know there's like a spirit around that is not, that I didn't invite. And I can absolutely feel them, and I can feel them hanging up above their heads. And I am like, yeah, it brings me into my little girl, and like I freak out and I'm like, run past the bar and come on,
Yeah.
let's go home.
Yeah, it's definitely like a, yeah, and I think, what you just said about using it to extract the, the properties of a plant, like, and the way that, say, like monks in different parts of the world have like produced alcohol, mostly in Europe. There is a capacity, I believe, for alcohol to be used in a more microdose or like gentle way, where it actually is not, I guess it's always harmful to our bodies on a biochemical level, but like it doesn't have to be damaging to our spirit. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that there are probably ways that it can be used that are more constructive, but I think that that's a delicate place, especially if you're still in, pretty deep in a healing process, right? Like to be able to find that way of relating to this substance not um, that is not so fracturing to our spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the other thing that I want to address in your story that I just thought was so fascinating, because you mentioned in human design being a manifester,
Mm.
right? And in human design, the way that we're manifesting is through our throat. And you had this
Mm.
locked, tight,
Mm.
tense jaw where you were probably holding a lot of things that were not being said, or that you were also like holding back, like saying, holding back your manifestation powers because they were confrontational, like you said, to your mother, right?
Yeah.
And I can relate to that. I mean, I had a lot of tension in my face and my neck and jaw, a lot throughout my 20s. And it was a lot of it was about not expressing anger for me,
Mm-hmm.
not expressing like the things that were hurting inside, the injustices that I felt. Um, and so becoming more self-expressed was a big part for me in healing that tension in my face. Um, so I bet you could probably say more about that. Like, how do you feel that the way that you speak and how you go about speaking creates your experience? How does it relate to manifestation, what we say and how we speak?
Well, I'm just realizing more and more with like awe, how much what I say, what is a true spell. And so I've always been, and this is due to like my astrology as well. I've always been a really good manifester. Like I'm very just lucky. And I also, like, I'm a Pisces sun. So I dream, like it's just in my nature to daydream all the time. And I've never, as hard as my childhood was, and it wasn't, um, it never broke my spirit and like my like, I guess the way I've always, I didn't have a whole lot of a childhood. It wasn't like, it wasn't a lot of fun. It wasn't like I don't have many memories of me just like giggling and running around. I was more of like a serious kid, but my um inner world is like all full of daydreams, and like nothing is unattainable. And so I'm just realizing my true power, what happens when I actually speak these things aloud. Um but when you are, so the trauma in my jaw, I've seen so many different healers and readers over the years to help me. And um, this one guy who I saw several times, who's amazing, he's in Costa Rica. He does trigger point therapy, but he's also gifted. So he'll be doing your trigger point, and then he just gets these insane downloads of your past lives, and he'll tell you, he's just like blah, 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 like rattling off like the the memory that he's like helping you to clear and heal. And so my jaw was actually, and I believe this is true for every issue that we have in human in this lifetime. Our soul imprints all of the memories onto this body, and I believe that the experiences that we have as children are to help us see those deeper memories. They're all kind of they're already imprinted within us. And so the parents that we choose, the family that we choose, the experiences that we choose is just to almost like dig into that scar, so that it awakens that pain, so that we can finally choose to become conscious of it and heal it. That's how I see and experience this life and healing. But anyway, so he told me, I'll never forget lying there, and he was saying, you had your tongue ripped out, you had your jaw broken. This is like two different lifetimes where I was a powerful woman, like in a tribe, and they didn't like it. They didn't like that I was a powerful, brave woman. And so like one time I had my tongue actually ripped out, and another lifetime I had my jaw broken. And he was still speaking to this resiliency. Like I still refused to shut up. Like I still was trying to do my work even with a broken jaw. And So it's been a very, very, very long standing, you know, deep journey for me to move up into my throat and speak honestly, and truthfully, because it can be like the things that come to me to say aren't always going to rub you the right way, right? They're going to trigger. If it's not, if it, and are you a manifester as well? It seems the way you're
I'm
talking.
actually a generator, pure
You're a
generator.
generator. Okay.
But my
Um,
dad is a manifestor, and I spent a lot of time with my dad. And he
okay.
definitely has that initiating energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of manifestors have this, and I honestly feel like I feel really at peace. I actually feel like proud of being a manifestor. I think it's a really exciting, design to be, but it can take a long time to like reconcile that, because it's a deep need. It's a need of human beings, right? We're social primates. We want to be liked. We want people to like us. We want to feel like we belong. And if you're constantly like bringing up like the depths of things that people don't want to hear in the moment, or like speaking the truth, um that it's going to trigger somebody or shock someone or whatever, it's not like an easy position to be in all the time, especially if your audience isn't the right audience. Like, so my friends growing up and in high school and stuff, they didn't get me. That's why I had to drink to try to fit in with them. I had to try to like dumb myself down. Not that they're dumb, but they just, I'd bring up things and they just roll their eyes. I was always very, very deep. And so, anyway, all that to say, it's been a long journey for me to like reconcile speaking, but it can be used also in a very exciting and powerful way. And the latest manifestation I'll say that I spoke and now it's happening is, so back in 2020, so we're like a touring family. My husband's a touring musician, and so for the last 10 years we really spent it on especially him, but I would go on quite a number of trips with him. And then 2020 happened and we just got grounded, which is the best thing that could ever have ever happened to us. We're both so happy, and our children as well. But I said back in 2020, the first place we're going to go when we can travel again is Mexico. And at that time, I didn't really think at all that that was going to be, it didn't seem attainable. It just didn't seem, I don't know. I'm just so used to traveling for his shows, and he would never go play in Mexico. So anyway, here we're going to Mexico for 6 weeks this winter for a getaway. And yeah, I just look back and that's so funny. I said that, but I didn't think it was.
You planted a seed. You planted a seed, and
Yeah,
then the universe kind of just took care of the rest, and your consciousness unconsciously kept creating the pathway to get where you said you wanted to go.
yeah. There you go.
Beautiful. Totally beautiful. And you know, it's fascinating to look back on like kind of where you've come from. I actually had the pleasure of working with a manifestation coach last year around this time, and it was my first formal introduction to certain kinds of methods that she was employing, and maybe these are similar to things that you practice and do, but she had me do something about like my current like living situation at that time. And it was something called like time traveling backwards, where you looked back on the pathway to like how you came to be here in this moment now, and you looked back on the pathway, and the goal was to see how you created the position that you're currently in, how you may have unconsciously through beliefs or through like life circumstances created the position you're currently in for your benefit, even if you can't see it at that moment. And that was very profound for me because my living situation at that time felt very frustrating. I was living in an area that I didn't really want to be living in. I just sort of like found myself there. And my husband and I were, overwhelmed with like the idea of like the cost of living in California and, where can we move and how would we get like, a place to rent when there's all these different rules about income and da 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 da, and you have to go through property management. That we had this whole like barrier in our way of thinking about how we would possibly live in a different environment. And as I was like doing this time traveling backwards thing with her, it was like I realized like, oh, like the thing that I'm experiencing right now that seems like I don't want to be here or something, I actually created this for myself unconsciously through these different experiences that came before this moment now. And maybe this is not the place that I resonate with and I'm ready to move on. But there was something about going through this process of remembering how I got here that was so healing and actually opened up a space inside of me beyond like the rules of property management and what you have to da 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 da. It opened a space inside of me for like the possibility of manifesting where I really did want to live. And it took about 3 months, but we ended up manifesting like the perfect place for us to live, where we're actually renting from like a person, like a human being, not a property management. And he's like a yogi dude from like the 70s who wanted us to live in his house because we're both on this healing path. My husband is a Zen meditator and I'm a somatic educator and a yoga person. And he wanted that vibe in his house, so it was like this very interesting process of kind of needing to reconcile the past, even if it was just kind of like the immediate past of the last 2 years, how we came to be here, and recognize that it was actually manifested for our learning experience, for our benefit, for our soul's discovery, even if that's not really where we want to stay. And I just found that process so beautiful, even though it took time. It wasn't like everything just shifted overnight or something. It took like 3 or 4 months for things to really shift. But it was through that, like really reconciling and experiencing the gifts of where we were, even though we want to stay there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I don't, so I'm not familiar with that practice, but the way that I would go about that with somebody, and this is the way that and I feel like it would probably get you the same result, or would get you the same result. So if somebody, let's take your story, for example, I would get you to feel into that frustration and really feel that frustration. And very likely, I don't know if you got this in your memory when you realized how you created this living place, but very likely there's a memory in there. Like I would get you to go into your body and find and invite the first time you ever felt that frustration into your memory. And likely there's a childhood experience that, and this happened not long ago with one of my clients. Actually, she her house was under renovation and she was just having a very hard time with it. And so we went in to the childhood memory where she felt displaced and chaotic and all that. And when she healed that feeling within her, it just takes validating your inner child, right? Then yeah, once you validate your inner child, then all of a sudden your physical reality is still going to be there. The construction's happening, you don't like where you live, that's there. But once you've healed all of the emotional gunk around it that's preventing you from being able to see the blessings, that's preventing you from being able to feel grateful that, you actually have someone that's fixing your home, insurance is covering it and all that, then also you can create the pathway for a new thing to come in. Because maybe what you saw in your experience, but the reason why you created this living situation for yourself, from my perspective, is so that you could actually heal all of the decisions, like, what, like, heal the root, like, why did you make these decisions? Why did you make these decisions so haphazardly? It's so that you can go back, from my perspective, you can go back and heal, the wounded part of you that decided you were only worthy of living in, this area, or, so it's extremely fascinating to me. It's like manifestation work is so much deeper than what we give it credit for. It's like, I mean, if you read like any deck of cards, I'm realizing, like any, deck of oracle cards, like everything is about us trying to get to the next thing, or like improve our situation and get lighter and lighter and lighter. Like manifestation is really just ascension. It's really just getting our outer world to match our inner world. And first we have to do the inner work.
Right.
Right.
Yes. And that was a big part, I mean, of this process of the time traveling backwards. And I think, I've done a few different like things in the last year, but what I remembered ultimately was that this feeling that I was having, because the feeling for me wasn't just frustration with my living environment, I felt homeless. Even though I had a
Mm.
home, I didn't feel at home in my home, and I didn't feel like there was space for me here. We lived on like the corner of a super busy street. There were like 5 accidents on that corner of like cars going like 50 miles an hour, like when they're supposed to go 35. Like it was just a very like chaotic environment around us. And so I didn't feel at home, right? I had this version of home inside my head that didn't match the version of home that was outside of my body, around me externally. And what I ended up realizing was that this acute kind of pain that I had from it was a very early memory of leaving my first home when I was a little girl. I loved this home and this like neighborhood, and I felt really safe there. And we moved to a different house that was just not as not my home. You know what I mean? It was a different kind of environment. And so I got in touch with that little girl who felt like homeless, who felt like she didn't belong in this environment, right? There's been a
Mm.
lot of that like process for me over the last year and a half or so, of really taking those memories and feeling into them, which is something that, I did a lot of talk therapy in my 20s. And I even did some like EMDR work, but I was not developed internally enough at that point to really feel these things
Yeah.
in a way that was productive. I would feel things and I would get stuck in them. I would feel things and I would get lost in them, right? And the somatic work that I've done with myself, that I now guide others in, has really helped me to have the capacity to feel those things and not be overcome by them and not be lost in them, and actually just be
Mm.
present with them in this delicate kind of way. um, and that's been really powerful, because what you're ultimately talking about with manifestation is this congruency between our inner and outer worlds, that, as you were saying, as we heal, as we develop, as we fortify our bodies and ourselves, this has the potential to start creating a reality outside of us that matches that vibration, right? That inner vibration that we're creating, that we're developing. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that. Like when somebody's experiencing that their outer external environment does not match what they're creating internally, what kind of suggestions or tools, how would you go about like guiding someone to get more congruent, to get more matching? Like what is in the way of that flow?
So if you think you're trying to create something, if you've got the vision board, even if you're following your soul's guidance and you're meditating 10 minutes every day, you're taking the steps, but externally nothing seems to be shifting. Your conscious mind, what you think, is only 10% of the thing.
Mm.
So if you're still having all of these experiences that don't feel good, you know, people turning their back on you, whatever, you know, the doors seem to be shutting in your face. That is showing you, all those experiences are simply trying to show you that's still you manifesting.
Yeah.
Because these experiences are showing you, hey, look here. Hey, feel that, feel that. You got to feel that. Okay. We got to feel this. It's like as soon as you decide, I want to be happy, I want to be fulfilled, you're instantly getting the messages. Your soul is like, all right, girl, let's do this. Let's do this. You know, your soul, your non-physical team, your guides, they're so excited that you're like, okay, she's becoming conscious. So yeah, things might start falling apart because you have to clear some space. You have to clear some space. You have to get rid, you have to clear out the things that are not serving you physically, which is going to help you clear out the emotional debris as well. So as, you know, Betty leaves your life, says you can't be friends anymore, you're going to feel the pain of that. And like you just said, you want to be careful not to get like stuck in it. Like I think if you're new at this, and if you really mean it, like if you really want to go somewhere fast, having a guide is like the best gift you can possibly give yourself. You know, it took me a long time to get to where I am. I spent 3 or 4 years meditating, doing energy work on myself in my closet up here and not here where I needed to be. You know, things could have taken me a lot faster if I had a guide. Anyway, but you have to trust that it's all happening. It's all happening for you. Things are only falling apart so that you can rebuild them again. And it 100% has to happen internally first. So the external things, they might be the first things to like fall away, switch off, you know, look ugly, whatever. That's going to bring up the emotional aspects of you that you have to deal with, the limiting beliefs, you know, becoming aware of the things you're telling yourself. What are you saying to yourself when Betty leaves? Are you blaming it all on you? Are you telling yourself what a bad person you are? Are you telling yourself nobody loves you? You're not lovable? All of these things, it's beautiful that they're coming up because now instead of hiding in the shadows, you're seeing them. Right? Now you're realizing, oh my God, I'm so mean to myself. Like that's always been there. That's always been there. If that's coming up now, that's always been there. It's just been in there in your subconscious.
Right.
So now it's actually a gift that you're getting to see this. And as long as you have some skills or guidance to really help you, or, you know, your connection to your intuition is really strong, we all have the ability to walk our way through. You know, listening to this podcast is giving you some, I'm sure it's giving you some insight right now. You know, if you're in this situation, there's a lot of souls right now on this planet who are going through this intense types of awakenings, right? Like things really falling apart because it's happening on a global level, you know, all at once. So it's a crazy and exciting time to be alive. I think it's like so exciting. But you might not right now, and that's okay. Get yourself some guidance or just, you know, just lean into your trust. One day at a time. You know, overwhelm can also be a really big aspect of your life when everything seems to be happening at once, and leaning into, I can only do one thing at a time. I can only deal with one problem at a time, one issue at a time, you know, taking it 1 minute at a time.
Yeah. These
And
are really beautiful, like golden advice that you're offering, like really special because we don't do one thing at a time in this world. We're conditioned to be multitasking and doing multiple things all the time. And it's actually draining our energy to be constantly in that state of trying to juggle a bunch of things. So in a way, like what you're saying, it's so, it's so simple. It's like that sort of Buddhist Zen, philosophy, like walking meditation one step at a time. But in practice, I feel like it's actually really radical. It's
Yeah.
really not, it's a really unusual way to take life, right? Because there's so much bombardment of energetically, like even just all of the, street lights and electricity and phones and everything, get into cities and it's the density of population. There's so much energy that's moving around us constantly that can be very disorienting. And what you're talking about is really breaking it down and coming back to ourselves and being able to tap into what's going on internally and feel into that and taking things one step at a time, recognizing that, if I can bring all of my attention to the task at hand, right? And really be present, like what opens up in that space that I create for myself. And this has been huge for me in the last year because this idea of like creating space for myself, even within a moment where there's a lot going on. Can I take a breath? Can I be conscious of my breathing for a moment and like come back to me? Because my trauma patterns are very, as you were describing before, little people pleasing and like trying to manage, different people's energies. And I'm actually like very good at that, good at managing a lot of different energies. I'm great at multitasking, but there's a limit to how successful that really is for me
Mhm.
in my day-to-day life. It's something I've learned to be like, okay, I can turn that on when I need to, and I also need to be able to turn that off
Yeah,
in order to hear what's happening internally, right?
totally. Yeah, we've been our brains have just been, oh my gosh, bombarded, like TV, like our brains have been wired to want everything to go really fast and like many things to happen at a time and to focus outward. And so I help part of my work is helping women to hear and trust their intuition, right? And intuition is very subtle. And what I found, I spent a good part of my journey like just begging for my intuition, and it was always there. For me, what I had to realize, and for a lot of people, that it's always there. It's the voice that I ignore, you know. It's the voice, not anymore. I know very well not to ignore it anymore, but it's the voice that, often you ignore. It's the subtle, it's the very, 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 very subtle, and your body speaks to you the same in very, very subtle ways until it has to start screaming. But because you're not listening. But attuning ourselves to the subtle energies is like, it takes focus, and it really, for our modern day people who grew up on TV and in cities and with so much happening and having to multitask, and it can take a little while to learn how to really drop in and tune in to just your own being,
Mm.
right? We're just like so trained to focus outward.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this I gotta just memorize her name because I end up Googling it all the time. But there's this researcher, this female researcher, and she has all this really fascinating research about how women, categorically tend to suffer more from like depression and things like this. And her belief is that the reason for that is that, well, first of all, they are maybe more likely to report it than men, but also that they are trained from a young age to experience their bodies from a third party perspective.
Mm.
And I thought this was fascinating. She's done quite a number of studies about how women are trained as little girls or as young people, to perceive their bodies as if they're a third person looking at them.
Wow.
And that disconnect can be responsible for the way that women have like more body dysmorphia, have more body issues, and also have different kinds of like body related depression and stuff like this. Very
Mhm.
fascinating research. But when I told my somatic mentor about this, she thought that this was very accurate, but she said, I think that most people are having that issue, not just women. I think there's plenty of men or people in general who are having this challenge of perceiving themselves not in the first person, but
Mm.
from a third party perspective. And so that it kind of is about coming back into our body, right? As you were saying, with like the different kinds of energy work and even yoga, it seems so physical, but most yoga is very, intense on a physical level. That's why some people, especially beginners, are like, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible. It's like, because it is very physically intense, it's not necessarily subtle.
Mhm.
And the internal experience of being in our bodies is actually a very subtle experience. It's not this extreme, tons of endorphins kind of exhilarating experience, right? It's actually subtle, like our digestion and the, biochemical processes that are going on. They're miraculous, they're fascinating, but they're actually just these like really subtle little energies, right? It's only when we have some kind of like catastrophe that things go haywire, right?
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that third party perspective thing. Even as a yoga teacher, I feel like I had to reorient even the way that I was using my language, because so many, maybe are familiar with this, like so many times in yoga, we're talking about the body
Mm.
instead of your body
Yeah.
or my body, the
Yeah.
body, the
Yeah.
backside of the hips. And in the language, it creates this like third party vision of a body, not my body that's being experienced by me, or your body that's being experienced by you. And so that was like a retraining that I did in my somatic yoga training, was like coming back into using the language
Mhm.
of your body or my body. Because yeah, there could be the body as like some sort of floating uninhabited body that's like dead or something. But if there's an arm or a leg, it's usually attached to a human being
Yeah.
or and a living creature, right?
Yeah.
And so using that language helps me and helps my clients connect and actually be in that experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. The style of yoga that I teach, it's hard to like I'm like, at what point are you not a yoga teacher anymore? I haven't taught in 4 years, but I might go back. I feel like you're always a yoga teacher. Once a yoga teacher, always a
I
yoga.
agree. Yeah, especially if you spent a lot of hours of your life doing it, for sure.
Yeah,
It's
a
in you.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like full time every day for 6 years. Yeah, always a yoga teacher. Anyway, the modality of yoga that I teach or taught, we were very careful, which is one good thing, on that language. Our elders would always remind us if we're saying the leg to switch back and do your leg, which is, yeah, because it is so important. As we were talking about when we speak, we're spelling, we're casting spells. The language that we say, the language that we use is very, very powerful in ways that we don't even grasp, I feel, because everything's vibration. And so we can affect people around us simply as, that using my leg reminds that student in the room, oh yeah, this is my leg. And then maybe you drop more into how it feels, and yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. It was definitely like I came from my yoga background. What I started with was hot yoga, Bikram yoga, which, yeah,
Bikram.
yeah,
I
which
taught Modo. They
oh,
have a
I don't know
it's a
that one. Is it hot?
Canadian. Pardon? It's
Is it
hot,
a
yes.
hot yoga? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Cool.
not as intense as Bikram.
Yeah, I was all hardcore and just really loved pushing my body to the limit. And that was part of why I ended up in so much pain, was that I
Mm,
was just pushing and pushing. And I had like a lot of goal oriented yang attitudes about my body like my body was some kind of project that I was working on rather than like this beautiful home that I get to take care of and experience, which is just a different energy, right? Um, and I think about that sometimes with like how I relate to my actual home, like my living environment, like, because tending to my body has become so important, but then now it's starting to extend into like, how am I tending to like my living space and like my environment outside of myself? Do I tend to that with the same care that I do my body, or
Mm.
do I kind of let things pile up and get, crazy and then like, shy away from that corner of the room where that's that pile of stuff that I haven't been dealing with, And I'm curious, do you do any work with with your manifestation work around objects and altars and creating space in your external environment as part of your manifestation work?
Not yet. It's funny. It's to admit, like, as a spiritual person, so many people have altars, and an altar. I have had one when I traveled. I would try to create one because it was kind of my portal to like um home, having some kind of physical representation that like grounded me. But in this home that we live, I have never created an altar other than for a ceremony in the middle of like a circle. Like I do women's ceremonies here at my home. And so, no, that's the short answer. We don't do altar work. We do. So I have a 3-month immersion. And we are 8 weeks into the first ever immersion experience. And we've just been diving into our own bodies at this point.
Mm.
Yeah. So diving into our bodies and really doing a deep, deep house clean of all of these limiting beliefs and toxic thought patterns and childhood trauma and all the deep dark stuff that no one wants to go in and heal. But it's incredible what happens when you do that work. Like all of the ladies, like there's been checks, people receiving checks, and these just like random checks from like one of the women worked in Australia 8 years ago, and she's receiving her tax check now, like all of a sudden, because she, is working on her beliefs around abundance and that kind of thing. Yeah, 8 weeks in, and another woman bought an investment property, which it's like on paper, it's completely doesn't really add up. Like she doesn't know how on earth she manifested. She was able to purchase this property, and all without an altar yet.
Yeah, well, what you're kind of describing is that you're creating like an internal altar, right?
Hmm.
And I think that those kind of tools, like the inner world, well, and this is just my personal belief, because the truth is that, I I don't do altar work at this time. I did do some altar work before I had a child, but there's something for me about having a child where I don't do the altar work because I'm afraid he's just going to take it all down or climb up there and get into it.
And they will.
Yeah, and, he broke my, like, crystal singing bowl recently, which was this, like, big upset for me, and now I, like, don't wanna buy one yet again because 'cause I'm like, "He's just gonna break that one too," like, you get into all these, like, things about that once you have a kid. So I'm not doing altar work, so much, but for me, that, like, process of clearing out my internal spaces, like, in my house, really does reflect, like, the things that I'm also, like, uncovering or excavating in my internal world. Like, I'll find that to be, like like and maybe this is some of it's just my own, like, internal process. Like, for example, I have a lot of clothes. I think women can relate to this, having a lot of clothes, right? And sometimes I will get into this bad habit of like, as I'm like looking through my clothes, deciding what to wear, I'll just sort of end up creating like a pile of clothes somewhere, whether it's on a chair or a basket or on the bed. And then when I figure out what to wear, I won't necessarily take the 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever to put all of those articles of clothing away. they'll just kind of sit there, and they might sit there for like a couple of days that I'm not really like tending to that, you know? And so what I found is like, okay, what does my clothing represent? It represents like the image that I'm bringing out into the world, how I'm adorning myself, and what like, vibrational message I want to be sharing with the rest of my environment through color, through the style, through the feel of the fabric on my skin, right? And part of tending to my image or to my like vessel is tending to my clothing. And so when
Yeah.
I'm not doing that, like what else am I not doing? Like internally tending to my tone of voice, tending to the way that I like handle myself. Am I following up with the people that I said I would follow up with? This kind of public relations stuff I feel like is reflected
Mhm.
in my pattern around my clothes, and whether or not I'm like tending to them or just leaving them in a pile to get kind of wrinkly, and then I can't find the thing that I want to wear, all that kind of stuff. And so I think, what you've just described is like creating that space internally,
Mhm.
and that there are ways like with an altar or with this like clothing thing that I just described that we can externalize that. But the most important thing is that it's happening internally,
Yeah.
right? And that we're doing that work to excavate and to uncover and to process these leftover energies from life experiences, from traumas, from maybe even past lives, as you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So what kind of like big leaps do you imagine for yourself, for your family, over like, say, if you can give yourself like a big timeline over like the next 5 to 10 years, like what would you see like occurring? I'm giving you like a moment here to like create something and we'll see. We'll
You
check in
are.
in 10 years.
I'm
Yeah.
like, that's exactly what you're doing. I just want to touch back though on the altar
Sure.
for one quick thing, because one
Yeah.
thing came through. Exactly. So it all comes back to internal work, because you can create the most beautiful altar, right? And go there every day and pray. But if the prayer does not bring you into the actual internal work that you're doing, you can pull a card, but if you're not actually going to the place that the card is telling you to go, if you're just like I was doing my energy work for years in my 20s, like not actually going where you need to go, the altar is going to do shit all, right? Because you're ignoring, you're not um you're using it to like from a mind perspective. Oh, look at my beautiful altar. Aren't I so, I've seen people do this with like their vision boards too, right? Creating this vision board, but then not taking the steps, not um, hiring the teacher, not buying the book that falls in their lap because they're too afraid to, spend the money or whatever. Like the universe is throwing at them, okay, you want what's on the vision board. So here, read this book, and here, this woman can help you. But you're saying, no, I can't afford this book. No, I can't afford this teacher. You're pushing off all of it's the same thing. We can have this beautiful altar. You're drawing a card every morning. It's telling you, feel into this, feel into that, but you're not doing it. It's just going to remain in this beautiful altar is just going to be there, but it's not going to do anything for you unless you're actually tending to your innermost thoughts, your inner landscape, right?
And you're actually allowing yourself to receive and be affected by
Mm.
this information, that these, the altar, the cards, anything that's going on in an external environment, my pile of clothes, these are really reminders of what is happening internally. They are not what is happening. They are a symbol or a reminder of what's happening internally. But if we
Yeah.
focus on that, then we miss out on actually doing what's really required internally in order for that reminder to mean anything.
Yeah. We're just going through the motions.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I spent many years doing that, and it's a lot of it now I recognize is just, it's the process of slowly, gradually awakening, and then of course we have these pivotal like boom moments, like what you described, when your father died, like these boom moments, but that the process itself is this actually like very paced, slow process for most of us,
Yeah.
and it doesn't happen all at once, right?
Mhm.
Well, getting back to my juicy invitation of where you see this movement that you're creating going, where you see like the bigger picture of things that in your process, if you were to kind of like imagine what's possible for you.
Gosh, well, that's a huge question. I want to say that honestly, and I've shared this a lot in my social media, and I shared this already in our discussion. Like my prayer, my desire has always just been to be happy. I haven't focused, like I haven't known how to get there, right? And so I can honestly say that I feel like I have that now. And like I know that I have that, like this true deep happiness that is unshakable, like my inner peace is here with me. And yes, that doesn't mean I don't go through human experiences that are really sad and, need to grieve. But my set point, like my emotional set point is drastically higher than it was. And so I feel really content. I feel really content. And, but having said that, like I do love to dream. And so, for me, dwelling is like a big thing. And we do already own a beautiful home on the ocean. Um, uh, but it could be, if I could go bigger. Like I don't know, like for me, I feel, and I'm doing my life's work too. I'm on purpose. So that feels really good. Um, so my dream would just be that this continues, that this I get to keep women keep coming and trusting me so that I can live my purpose and watch them expand and grow and heal. Um, and I've also always really wanted to live in Hawaii. So I'd like to have two homes. I want to have one in Hawaii and one here on this island.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What about you?
Oh man. So I I have a vision for the somatic work that I've been doing already, which is very physical. I work with the neuromuscular system and help people release muscular patterns of tension, pain, trauma that are accumulating, right? And more, I've found that the people who are really attracted to this work are people who already have some kind of background in these things, like whether they are yoga teachers or physical therapists or trauma specialists and things like this. And that's the person that I've been really enjoying working with because they're ready for like the information that I have. Because some
Mhm.
people, if they're new to this, and you probably, have had people that are really new to some of these ideas, and maybe pretty early on in their healing journey, there can be like an information overload. But for
Yeah.
someone who has like already done a lot of personal work and already maybe has several modalities that they use, the somatic work that I offer, they come in hungry for all of the information. And so what I'm starting to envision, and that's part of this podcast, is creating like a larger, more global community of people who are sharing all of their different knowledge as it relates to the area of somatics, right? And I'm building out my own school. And so I will, in my next 5 to 10 years, I will be transforming that school so that people can come and either do self-paced courses in somatic movement, or they can also learn to become a practitioner. So eventually in the next 10 years, I'd like to be training practitioners to be able to do this work, because I do it over Zoom, but there's also a hands-on work that I do. So my bigger vision for my business is definitely about creating more expansion in opportunity for like everybody who's on these different kinds of paths, and
Mm.
featuring be people who are knowledgeable, people who are full of integrity, and featuring people like you who fit all of that information I just said and are also ready to share their stories. Um, so that's the bigger picture of like the dream of this free or soma, um, yeah, culture or um, organization, right? And then more personally for me, I am also big on home. I also want to create like multiple landing spaces for myself and my family. I'm not sure whether or not that means that like we own property perhaps somewhere, or that we have these like spaces that we have access to. Um,
Mm.
that might also be okay with me if we don't physically own it, but that we have these places, these spots, or maybe across the United States or even across the world, that we have, access to and are able to go visit and spend time. And I'd love to be taking my son, who's 4 right now. I'd love to take him traveling. So these are the bubbly little dreams that I'm
Yeah,
carrying, little and big, I guess.
that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And may our our dreams become real, and they will. That's the thing. And that's what I teach is like if you're if you are following your soul's guidance, which you 100% are, right? Your dreams are inevitable. They're
Mhm.
meant to become true. That's why you have them.
Yeah, that's an
And
awesome word,
so,
inevitable. That's a perfect word for it. And I felt that way when I started doing this, offering this somatic work over Instagram. And maybe you felt that way too when you started creating your program and offering it to people. You're like, this at first is kind of scary. You're like, is this going to work? And
yeah,
then it starts working. You start attracting the people to you who resonate with your message,
yeah,
right? And it's inevitable. That is such a perfect word for it. Um,
yeah,
for anybody listening and you've been hearing about like our dreams and our projects, maybe you have your own. Maybe this is inspiring you to start thinking about where you dream to be and what you dream to be doing in the next 5 to 10 years of your life as you're in your somatic experience of your life. Um, and Jane Allen, would you like to maybe guide our listeners through just a little meditation to kind of hone in maybe on um, their soul's purpose? Would you feel comfortable doing that?
sure, yeah. Okay. So unless you're driving, pull over. If you're driving, come into a comfortable position. And I am not a stickler. If you know how I teach meditation, I you can lay down. Just come into a comfortable position. Laying down, seated, taking your right hand to your heart and your left hand to your belly. And just take a few breaths to drop into your body. Just as we've spoken about, we just spent a lot of time, you just been listening outwardly for the last hour or so. So now noticing your rib cage expand as you breathe in. Feel it fall as you breathe out. It's dropping into this soft animal that is your body. Maybe sighing out to let go of everything you've just been told, everything you've heard. Dropping into you, and we'll invite a grounding cord. I always do this in every meditation because it just helps us to ground and center. So the way I do this is to invite a cord up from the center of the earth and invite it to connect to your root chakra. And you may or may not be aware of the instantaneous exchange of energy which takes place when you invite this cord. Mother Earth is sending you energies to help support you, nourish you, help you drop into this present moment awareness. And your body now, with this connection energetically, is able to start releasing energies. Just accumulated energies that your body has no use for can begin to funnel down into the earth. Just so that you can get a clearer perspective, gaining a clearer perspective on your internal reality. And with your hand on your heart, I want you to invite in your inner child. It can be the essence of your inner child. It can be an actual memory. You can create a vision of your inner child. There's no wrong way to do this. This version of your child, your inner child that you bring forth, I want you to invite it to be the version of your inner child who has a dream in his or her heart. That innocent, playful, not jaded, just this beautiful dream. That your soul wants to share with you now. And there's no right or wrong. It can be a beautiful home. I always dreamed about that as a child. It's not vain. It can be a safe, loving family. Maybe it's a partner that you want to create a family with. It can be a sailboat that you get to adventure on. There's no notice if something comes in and your initial reaction is to shut it down or shame it or say that can't be it. Okay, so that's important information as well. Trusting whatever's coming through to you. What does this little version of you, what lights her up? What gets her excited? What gets her juices flowing? Whatever is coming to you, I want you to look at that little girl or little boy. Whatever they're sharing with you, whether they're saying it verbally or whether they're just exuding it, they're just daydreaming it in front of you. Maybe they're just shining with this idea or dream. With your adult loving eyes and heart, just take that information in. Reaching your arms out to that little girl or boy. Just say thank you. Thank you for sharing this with me. Making a promise to that child version of you who is very much alive and well within you today. Make a promise that you will not let them down. That you will continue to work towards realizing this dream, whatever version of it. Let's say the child that you see wanted to be a firefighter and that's what they're sharing. You can promise to complete the energy of thrill. Maybe that's what they're really sharing with you. It's up to you to decode. There's no right or wrong, but you just promising that beautiful, innocent version of you, you will not let them down. That you will fulfill their desire because their desire is your desire. And when you're ready, giving that beautiful child a hug and dissolve them back into you, being aware if there's anything else they want to share with you. Feel free to move into journaling once this is over. Allow the information to continue to pour through. You've opened up a portal now for your soul to speak to you. So do not be surprised if you begin to receive downloads and information and next steps and opportunities. This is how your soul works, by sending you opportunities and ideas. And you take action on those, and then that's how you create what you want. It's through you. You create it. Take a deep breath in. Thank you so much. Beautiful work.
That was so lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I had a really fun memory come back that I haven't thought about in a long time. And I had like it had like a new understanding or something in it. So when I was a little girl, and I would play with other little girls and we would play like princess or we would play like dress up. I always wanted them to be the princess so that I could be the handmaiden or like the person who would dress them and like adorn them. And it was funny because it always seemed like because they were the princess, like they were in charge. But what I realize now is that like being the designer, being able to be the one that like put the outfit on them and like, arrange the clothes or arrange the environment was like my actual subtle way of like help of being, kind of covertly like the boss or something.
Yeah.
And then I always loved like making my little friends like more beautiful or more balanced or like creating like more harmony in like whatever we were doing, and that was the role where that could take place, was like being like their servant or something. And I had that memory come back as you were talking about this, and it reminded me of like the work that I'm doing now is a service, just as what you're doing now is a service to others, where we're helping, women, or, I've worked with men as well, create more harmony and balance within themselves. And so I can like feel into that little girl version of it, which was like dress up, of wanting to elevate the other person, to make them the queen or the princess, or like to elevate them and then serve them for their highest good, right?
I love that. And that's like your work, like just as much like it's making them feel good to be all beautiful, dressed as the queen. You're getting just as much enjoyment out of it because you love the process of guiding them or, dressing them or whatever.
Right. And they're getting this feeling of being tended to. And I'm tender. I enjoy that, taking care of something and nourishing something. And I'm a double Cancer, so maybe that's why. But like, I love that process of like helping, serving another to like their growth and their their benefit. So that was a really beautiful memory that came back when I connected with my little girl today. So thank you for catalyzing that, for creating space for that message to come through. It was really lovely.
You're welcome. That's beautiful. And it's just like you're right on track, which you already knew that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Every reminder is a blessing.
yeah.
Every little mark along the path, to be able to take that moment and bow, because as you were saying before, like, I'm still a human and I get dysregulated and I get stressed and like things happen in my world that throw me off, and then coming back to center, having those little external reminders that bring me back into myself, right? Rather
Mm,
than thinking the external is like where it's at, but those are reminders of what's going on inside.
yeah.
Those things are precious. And, I've had a number of those kind of affirmative experiences today with you. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your story, sharing some of your process, and that beautiful meditation that we just all got to experience. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My true pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And this has been so much fun.
Yeah. And if our listeners want to connect with you, can you tell them? I mean, we'll have it in the show notes as well, but
Yeah.
maybe you can just say where the best places to connect with you are. And, if you have any upcoming events or offers, you can also share about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do all of my marketing on Instagram. So my handle is lovejaneorg, GANJANE, lovejaneorg. And my website is lovejane.org. And I have the next round of my 6-week immersion, no, 3-month immersion. I don't know when this podcast is going to be airing, but we begin January 22nd, 2023. That's our first date for the next round, and I'm accepting applications now. And truly, if you feel called, you'll never look back. It's just been the most magical thing for everyone involved. So I sincerely invite you into our group if it's not too late, but I'll be running it 4 times a year. So every 3 months.
Sweet. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, to all our listeners out there, definitely connect with Jane. I connected with her on Instagram, and I've loved the content and information that she shares and just the resonance that she shares. There's so much joy in what you share, and there's so much compassion also in your being that everyone got to experience today. So connect with her on Instagram, and keep an eye out for January 22nd when that next round of her program begins. And to all of you out there, have a beautiful day manifesting your reality, because we're always manifesting, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously. You can start to look around for the little signs in your world and in your environment that are guiding you home to yourself, to that inner world that is so incredibly valuable, precious, and requires tending.
Yep, that's right. Okay, well, you take care, beautiful people.
Yeah.
Take care, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Free Your Soma podcast. To find out more information about today's guest, check the show notes. And to find out more information about me, Amy Takaya, and the Radiance program, visit www.freeyoursoma.com.